Today we're talking about divorce and I'm in conversation with lawyer Malavika Rajkotia. She started her practice in the year 1985 and specializes in family and matrimonial law. Thank you so much for your time. Let's kickstart. What is the first legal step a woman should take if she wants to leave her husband?
I think before that is a kind of a pre-legal step, which is actually a discussion with the husband in the first place that she wants a divorce. And because it is a difficult decision, you don't just get up in the morning and say, I'm going to take a legal step. And then, of course, slowly to move. Now we have something called a pre-litigation mediation, which is always a good start because there's no reason, considering it's a family, there are often children, more often than not, then it's better to resolve with dialogue rather than jump into hostility straight away. So first, pre-legal step, conversation. Next, depending on urgency, if not that urgent and dialogue, then pre-litigation mediation. Otherwise, then there are various filings that can be done.
In your experience, do dialogues work and how often? What's the percentage?
Yes, they do. They do. They work at international diplomacy, and even that doesn't seem to be recognized at the moment, though they would, but certainly in family lives where everybody wants to move on. But yes, you have toxic situations where there are entrenched positions. But then it's a question of time.
Once people start on this journey, what is the mistake they make? Is it not having the dialogue or is it doing something?
No, I think that your lawyer will advise you. Sometimes the dialogue, it's necessary. In any case, it's advisable. Sometimes there are urgent situations. You're going to get thrown out of the house. A property is going to be sold. The children are going to be taken away. You have to jump into court and take those measures, protective measures. So those 30 days are basically understanding the reality of a situation and taking advice, not just having your own narrative. A lot of my time is spent with, frankly, even fighting with my clients because I can see a picture from a wider vision that they can't. So they have to be willing to see it.
How do people kind of get themselves to being open-minded, taking the correct advice? And if there is
I think it's a personality thing. Some people just are not and then will figure it out over a long period of time, which is a tragedy, really. But yes, the mistake of 30 days is not to take proper legal advice and proper counsel.
But in these urgent situations, are things resolved where they're selling a house, the children are being taken?
Once you have those injunctions in place, then it's literally like your warheads, etc., are in place. Then you have the dialogue.
Should one ever leave the house without legal advice? I believe some people continue to stay on in a house, even if,
you see, that's not just true of a family divorce situation. That's true of a disputed property situation as well. You are never to give up possession of a property. So yes, one should not walk away so easily.
Should every married woman have investments in her own name?
Oh, for sure. Point is also but access to the money to make the investments in the first place. There are earning women who hand over their money to their spouses and who then invest as they like, and when it comes to the time of reckoning, suddenly realize that it's all disappeared. So yes, control over your finances where you have finances in the first place and you have independent means, then certainly.
There's so many more people educated. You have Google, you have ChatGPT. Are people getting a prenup now or still no?
It's a mindset. Are you willing to discuss situations of divorce while you are getting married? Some people kind of think it's a bad omen or something. I personally think it's very practical and it should be done. It is mistakenly thought that it is illegal in this country, but it's not. It has not been explored enough, but one should know that a prenup should look fair because it should not be subjected to challenge on the ground of unequal bargaining power, which in our societies, most of the time, women don't have an equal bargaining power. So, but yes, it's a good starting point in any case.
Why is it that in our society women don't have an equal bargaining power? Because internationally
I personally don't think it's anywhere in the world.
But don't women internationally get 50% of the
No,
assets?
no. There is no, except in California, this is even in England, UK jurisdiction, it's called equitable distribution. It's not a division through the middle. It's related to tenure of marriage. So if you marry a billionaire and are with him for 1 year, you're not going to get half of his wealth. It's basically what is accrued over that 1 year. And even then, it's not half, because it's really a question of your investment in the marriage, which then deserves for you to get out with a certain sum, which may include damages if you manage to demonstrate domestic violence and such. But broadly, the rule is reasonable needs and wants, or needs and reasonable wants. That is pretty much across the world. But equality of bargaining power, I mean, no, not all over the world. Just because women there look different and seem to be more confident, and I'm not even sure about that. But the dynamics of the family, in fact, with the current political surge that's going all over the world, is back to very conservative modes, where a wife is basically a homemaker. That is true even in the conservative right wing in USA, for example.
Going back to prenups, are people now, as you said, it's considered a bad omen. So Indians still do not look at prenups, or is it like a 2% or a 5%?
No, it's never 2%, etc. I mean, I've hardly done 2 or 3, and that too with very wealthy, where both spouses were wanting to ring fence their own finances. So that was clearly an equality of bargaining power. But where there is a very wealthy husband says, I want to be able to provide for my wife who is a homemaker in a graded way. I've not done that, and frankly not come across that, except there's one judgment in the High Court, which is about now 20 years old, which makes a tangential reference to a post-nup agreement, which was a separation agreement. When there was a dialogue, parties arrived at, these are the terms of separation, which the husband subsequently challenged, and the court did not sustain the challenge.
What documents should women be aware of?
What is required in court? So that's a good indicator, because nowadays you have to file what are called financial affidavits, which are your tax returns over the last 5 years, or depending on the tenure of the marriage and so on, credit card bills, what are the properties that are owned, lifestyle indicators like club memberships, bills of such, what are the class of, did you fly business class and so on, what is the kind of hotels you go to. So I don't think there's really much need for secrecy any longer, because it's all there in the digital world, quite easily accessible.
Can a husband legally deny his wife financial information?
Legally, no. But of course, you see, here is the imbalance which is apparent clearly. We are presuming that it is the husband who's moneyed and the woman is not. And the presumption is right. And that is really the problem of the 21st century, never mind women's liberation, this, that, and the other, which goes to show that is true the world over. So things haven't really changed as much as many women like to think they have, just because a few are wealthy, right? He can't deny, but he always tries to ring fence. He tries to minimize the concept of needs and reasonable wants. So that's always a tussle.
What's the biggest financial shock women face during divorce?
Under the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, there is a law to that effect. There is something called economic abuse. And that actually becomes the worst during litigation. It's almost as if the litigation itself is weaponized by holding back what would be the money and so on and so forth, holding back access to facilities and so on. So that is the first shock which they have to deal with.
And how can they prepare for that or overcome that?
I mean, unless you're willing to just take the shock. I had a client who was exceedingly wealthy, married into an exceedingly wealthy home. She'd never even traveled anything other than first, not forget business. And she said, well, I'm thin enough and I'll just take economy, it doesn't matter. Now that sounds like at some level of privilege, oh, well, she went to New York, economy. But it's just an indicator. Like she wasn't, she was willing to roll with the punches. Then she didn't fly. Then eventually she did have to ask her family for money. Then eventually it did get settled. But you have to be robust. It's an exhausting fight.
You said about how women are not as empowered, even though they might like to assume so. How can one change
Others
that?
like to assume so. I
Yeah.
don't think women themselves
But
who are not empowered think they are
how
empowered.
can that be altered? And will it ever be altered?
I mean, to say it'll never be altered would, of course, is just goes against my grain. It's impossible. As you were saying earlier, change is inevitable. It's the only constant. So, of course, there's a movement. But if there's a movement, there will also be a reaction. So today, compared to the 70s and 80s, when the world was, in many ways, I thought freer when it came to women like us who were, doing the marches and fighting the battles and doing various kinds of work. I don't see that happening now. Now there's almost as if they've got co-opted into the patriarchal structures, and they've got co-opted because it's seemingly comfortable. They are more comfortable now than they were 20 years ago, but that's not a reason to accept your secondary position because you're comfortable. So at the moment, that's the reaction. So it seems to be, but it will change. I do believe it will change. It's inevitable.
What were the major reasons for divorces in 2006 or 1996 to 2026?
You see, the divorces have increased. And I think a lot of it is to do with not because people are worse or marriages are worse. I think it's now there is a desire to live a quality of life which perhaps with the partner there's not the sense of fulfillment that one had accepted. Having said which, marriage is an institution which does require a lot of sacrifice and a lot of commitment, and the commitment is also to go through the bad times. But once you've had that dialogue in your head and realized that the purpose of the commitment, which was to keep a structure for the children, etc., doesn't exist any longer, and there's no reason my sacrifice is too much compared to what the other person is, then there is a talk of divorce. Those are the kind of conversations that are happening now. About 20 or 30 years ago, it was mostly abuse, horrendous abuse, obvious things like an affair. Now you've moved into grayer areas which are not easily explained. Very often it's not that she's bad or he's bad, but I think this is not what I wanted. So it's become more abstract and esoteric, and but that's a privilege.
So do you think the Indian man has evolved over the last 20 years?
No, unfortunately, no. Obviously, there are exceptions, but when it comes to the crunch, the reactions are almost stereotypical. Stereotypical assertions of power, resentment of her assertion to power, her bid. In the current society, this is almost politically, if you say, it's like the neoliberal. So 20 years ago, even though there was the patronizing, which we resented, part of patriarchy, which was still kind of protective. But now it is literally, okay, you want equality, here it is. So even that degree of that protection and safety net is taken away. And that is neoliberal politics today of the times. So women are suffering it because then you don't have the safety nets which the state had provided, which relationships had provided, which patriarchal attitudes included, but not any longer.
But do you think it's because of the current world we live in where everybody is more narcissistic, which kind of enters
yeah, I know. It's interesting that you speak of narcissism almost as a world order. I don't know enough, but it seems the thing to say. But obviously a psychoanalyst would have something to say about it. But yeah, at pop psychology level, yes, there is complete self-absorption. There is lack of empathy. That is also what is happening in the world, is lack of empathy. Even levels of war with children getting bombed is sociopathy.
Has social media damaged modern marriages?
Yeah, maybe there is access to a wider network and there are inappropriate interactions which perhaps were not there earlier because the opportunity was not there earlier. Now there's the texting and this and that. But why is it a damage to the marriage? It's just another phase of relationships which now has to be. We can't, it can't be so static that because there's social media, there's damage. You have to evolve, and yes, if there are inappropriate, then you draw your boundaries as to what is appropriate. It's all part of an evolving discussion, really.
Children and custody. Who really gets custody in India? Is it women mostly?
There's no rule. The central rule is welfare of the child. And we constantly keep trying for continuity of caregiving. And so continuity obviously means the mother is invariably the caregiver. There are, of course, now very involved fathers who say, now we want equal caregiving arrangements. There is something called collaborative caregiving. So there are modern fathers who want to be more involved in the lives of their children, and that is very good. And there are mothers who then hang on to the children as their only asset in the marriage that they want to retain, really. And it becomes almost a tussle between his money and her children. And that's actually what the tussle is about. It ceases to be about who's at fault in the divorce any longer.
And how long does it take now for the tussle to come to a resolution?
If you come to settlements, which constantly there are efforts made, pre-litigation, lawyers, judges at every level, and so on and so forth, there are constantly efforts. That commitment is there by the system, I have to say. But otherwise, if you're going to trial, it can take years.
When it comes to child custody, what is the correct route, or has it
There's
changed?
no correct route.
Because over the last few years, how parenting has evolved.
Yes.
Has child custody and how
Yes, it
the
has.
legal system looks at it evolved?
Yes,
So,
yes.
how?
It's certainly better. Earlier on, it used to be, okay, children will continue with the mother and father will be just a weekend parent, which unfortunately continues, which shouldn't necessarily. There should, if the father wants to participate, there should be certainly inclusiveness in that, and it might even help. You see, when you talk of collaborative parenting, we are going to co-parent. When you hate each other, doing anything collaboratively is impossible. So it is an issue.
What should parents never do during separation?
They always do, and what they should never do is actually bring down the other parent to the child, right? Let the child know how much they hate the other parent. And they all sort of say, no, I've never done that. But children are very smart. They pick it up as well. So it's not only what they should never do, but actually it should be what they should actively do, is at least on the parenting front, try, be calm for the purposes. But it's very misused, and human beings, till they get out of their own resentments, I think it's a difficult task.
Does the court prioritize the child in a divorce situation?
Yes, certainly. Child is central. Whatever decisions are taken in the welfare of the child. I mean, I may have a view that what eventually they think is welfare is not really welfare, but that's a question of opinion. But that is the law.
So what do they think is welfare?
I mean,
think...
I've noticed this particularly in cases of international custody battles, where sometimes it is thought, oh, it is a very good idea that the child should go to wherever they went abroad, you see, back to the father, to the left behind parent. Now there, the cost of to the child of leaving the mother behind, and actually this is done knowing that the mother won't leave the child behind. So it eventually ends up with the mother going as well. So she loses all autonomy, number one. Number two, here opportunity is treated as welfare, because it is presumed that in America, I mean, I don't know why, but it is that, it's this God's own country, great education, this, that, and the other, so the child should have access to that. Whereas with small children, our own home scenarios are actually much more secure, nurturing. The school shootings incidents over there, I'm not sure it's necessarily the best place for little children. But anyhow, be that as it may, my point is opportunity is not necessarily welfare. That distinction needs to be made.
Is staying in a toxic marriage sometimes better than divorcing?
I don't know. I mean, I don't see it, right? But some people are comfortable with, they normalize the toxicity. They find their separate peace outside because they want to be within the structure which gives them security. That's an individual decision.
And you've met so many people over your tenure as a lawyer. Does that affect the children, or do they not see it?
I wonder.
And do they grow up
I
as
wonder.
secure individuals,
Yeah.
more grounded
I don't
than
think,
not?
yeah, I don't think there's necessarily one answer to this, but really it depends on the child. It depends on the relationship that the child has with the parents. Depends on the honesty sometimes, but it could be anything. Bad marriage, but a structure maintained sometimes is good for the child. Perhaps, I have no idea. I guess it's each case, each situation, really.
Is alimony still relevant in 2026?
Yeah, because one party, which is invariably the wife, has hardly any earning capacity and certainly doesn't compare to the other. So we have to always talk alimony. It's not about divorce after a while. It's not about, okay, we are going to have the piece of paper that says divorce. It's about what do we do about the children and how do we divide the money. That's it.
Can you have a peaceful divorce in India?
Oh,
You can
yes.
give us an example, perhaps.
I mean, we were mentioning a particular author earlier, right? In her book herself, her divorce was very, very peaceful, where in fact they were sitting next to each other in court, and she said that, the judge shouldn't misunderstand that, do we really want the divorce, That's one instance. The other is another friend of mine. I'd done their divorce as well. And there too, she kind of hugged him just before we were going in that, okay, now, I set you free. He wanted the divorce. He was panic stricken. Oh my God, the judge might think, there's humor sometimes, but it's very rare. It's very sad, but it's also does have its moments which then perhaps a different type of relationship can emerge, which it does in those kind of cases.
But what is your advice to those in a toxic marriage who have it hard, who are perhaps beaten, who are perhaps narcissistic, and it's just difficult to navigate marriage?
I mean, how can I advise? I only say, I'll do what you say, right? I'm there to take instructions. But yeah, you can edge that, find the courage. Do you really want to live the rest of your life like this? There's a lot of fear about being alone, particularly amongst women. Men kind of obviously their value in the marriage market, remarriage market, doesn't go down. It may even go up because middle-aged men have more wealth. So they continue to be eligible. Middle-aged women will not necessarily find their age-appropriate partners because those men are looking to younger. It is a social conditioning of men. And once women get over the fear of being alone, actually it is they themselves who then don't want to be married again. I've noticed that as well.
But that is so sad that how, as you said, the middle-aged man is always more attractive than the middle-aged woman.
Yes.
So that is so sad. That is the past, and that will continue, or you think that will alter as well?
I wonder. I mean, nowadays you do have instances of women remarrying, and sometimes much younger men and so on. Not that that's some achievement. I think marriage itself and the concept is also changing. While we are talking, we are only talking in terms of heterosexual monogamy. Today, people are exploring polyamories. People are exploring, partnerships outside. So the structure itself is going to change.
What legal right do most women don't know they have?
Sometimes they say, can I leave? I find that really, but don't you realize you're free? So I don't think they realize they have the right to be free.
When you say they have the right to be free, what does that mean in detail?
Take your decisions. I say you decide. I'll do as you say. I can't take your decision for you.
But I think maybe, as you said, there is stigma attached to divorce. So perhaps when they leave, where do they go? Will the maternal house
exactly?
accept
But that's
them?
different to a right.
Yeah.
Right? So she has the right to leave. Whether she has the courage because of the social consequence of exercising that right is the journey.
And are people making it more now, or
I think
do
so.
they?
I think so.
But our maternal
that stigma
is
is
there?
not
Yeah. What
there.
about the stigma? Yes.
I don't think that's there.
But we recently read how a woman was, I think, abused and she committed suicide. So it
I
was in
mean,
the
you've
papers.
read of the man who
And now
committed-
she's educated. She has the financial means. But
You're talking of the South Delhi case
yes,
recently.
yes.
I mean, this is a human issue. It's not, it's intensely emotional. When you're dealing with it, there's pain of decades which emerges. There's self-esteem, there's violence, there's oppression. Reactions are different. They're not, firstly, when they say, what would a reasonable man do? It's impossible. Divorce and marriage is not a reasonable situation. It's not a contract where, okay, a sensible person will do X, Y, Z. It's not sensible. You're only in the realm of emotion and feeling and irrational.
What is one step an unhappy woman should take tomorrow?
I think she should get up in the morning and say, today I am going to fearlessly think about the step to be happy.
Coming back to the word marriage and how is that altering in 2026? You said it's just not about the marriages that we've known in 1950. So how is that evolving? The idea of marriage in India?
So again, there is the schism, you see, the conservative, the progressive, and by progressive, I don't mean suddenly they have, they're not moral, but they don't want to be bound in the traditional morality. So the whole approach to an extramarital affair, the morality of it is different. It's not the end of the world. That's an example. Pain apart, obviously, that's as old as love and anything. There's bound to be pain but take the case of the recent case which Supriyo, where there was an effort to have same-sex marriages. The court didn't recognize it is not the point. Actually, it will eventually, I hope, I think it should, the trajectory we are on. Like Navtej Johor's same-sex consensual intercourse was decriminalized. But the first case, Naz, they lost the case. Then subsequently with the Navtej Johor case, they won. So these things will carry on. Societal point is important, that they want to have recognition of the same-sex relationship. What is interesting is that they want marriage, which is traditionally only conservative, very middle class, very bourgeois kind of a structure. But I think it's because, so it's not that that structure is being thrown away. It is being made to expand and change its form. So clearly marriage, the legality of it, and the state needs it to recognize families because there are legal privileges attached to a legal family structure, right? So the state needs it for that reckoning, so to speak. So for the same-sex couples who now want to be part of it, it's also for that. So there's the legal marriage. Otherwise, relationships, of course, that's a separate thing. So for relationships, now it's not a stigma. We know of openly gay couples living together and so on and so forth. But for them to now opt into an institution of marriage, not because they want to be conformist, but because they want marriage and its meaning to expand the new. That's the difference.
Sorry for going back to the stigma related to divorces. Do you see that changing? You said it hasn't reduced in the last 20, 30 years. There's still a stigma.
It has reduced considerably. Yes, it has.
Okay.
It has. Stigma has reduced, but the fear of the change has not.
And how will that alter?
Stigma is societal reaction. Fear is the personal reaction of the person.
What can be done to reduce
I think that's an individual journey, which after a while they do realize is perhaps the best thing that happened or something. I don't know.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.